Today through Sunday could be the most important week for Miami Hurricanes recruiting this summer. And here's why.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. On this busy episode of Locked On Canes, we will discuss Miami's most versatile players heading into the 2024 season, the Swiss Army knives, the guys who can make differences with X plays this year. I want to take a deep dive on the Phil Steele Preview Magazine, which just dropped digitally this week. Phil has actually been, his magazine has been the most accurate predictor over the past 29 years, and he's bullish on Miami heading into this season. But, folks, we have to talk about a big, not just weekend, but a big week coming up for Miami Hurricanes recruiting, because you've got a pair of the top wide receivers in the country taking a midweek visit starting today, starting Tuesday. In the case of Jaime Ffrench and Vernell Brown III, they have had to tweak their visit schedules due to 7-on-7 tournaments and involvements in other things. So they're going to be on campus starting today. Jaime Ffrench, 5-star wide receiver out of Mandarin High School in Jacksonville, 6'1", 185 pounds. Vernell Brown, 4-star receiver out of Jones High School in Orlando, 5'11", 170 pounds. And this is a very interesting opportunity Miami has here for a couple of reasons. Number one, I know that sometimes people will look at the midweek visit and say, oh, I don't know, midweek, is that kind of a throwaway? Is it like a courtesy to come down for the midweek? I know that Miami's staff, from Mario Cristobal to Dennis Smith on down, they take every official visit opportunity, weekend or midweek, extremely seriously, and they are going to put everything but the kitchen sink out there for Jaime Ffrench and for Vernell Brown. And it's also an opportunity in the point of view that with these guys being the lone main visitors, so much attention is going to be on them. So it's definitely an opportunity here. Now, on the flip side, these are two players I believe Miami is climbing uphill for. Hurricanes are not considered favorites for either of them. I actually think Miami might have an even better shot right now with Jaime Ffrench than with Vernell Brown. You know, we talked about Ffrench. We talked about both of them, actually, but we talked about Ffrench yesterday with Brian Smith, our recruiting overlord. And, you know, he noted that some of the other schools that have been in it for Ffrench, Ohio State seems like they might be out of the picture for now. I don't know what happened on his OV to Ohio State, but apparently things didn't go very well. And Smith doesn't think Texas is necessarily the favorite anymore, because for the past several weeks, things had been trending strongly for the Longhorns. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that Ffrench is coming to Miami, because Smith indicated to me that there are obviously a ton of teams that are in it for Ffrench. He's one of the top players in the class. And he emphasized that doesn't seem like Ffrench is anywhere close to making a decision right now. But with Miami getting this visit opportunity starting today, it gives them a chance to take some momentum, set the tone, and raise the bar for the rest of Ffrench's recruitment. But this is a player that I don't necessarily think is going to make a decision on a verbal commitment anytime soon, but there is opportunity for Miami. I don't want anyone, because I get some comments on our YouTube channel, like for some weirdos. I'm glad Mario Cristobal doesn't have the attitude that some of you have, where it's like, why are we even wasting our time recruiting Ffrench? This guy's not coming here. Why waste our time? There have been plenty of players over the years that don't necessarily trend to Miami until they come out of that official visit. Now, with Vernell Brown, Miami's definitely, I think, swimming upstream with this one. Brian Smith told us that Florida State should be considered the heavy leader right now with him. So again, we'll see if Miami can change the narrative and set the tone with those official visits starting this week, starting today. And then this weekend coming up, We're going to go through some of the top players that are going to be on campus. And again, why I feel like this is the most important week of the summer with these official visits. You finally get DJ Pickett in for his OV. Of course, he's been down here for unofficials. One of the top players in the country, 5-star defensive back. He's got the family ties to Miami, right? He's got some reasonably close geographical ties. He plays in the Tampa area, not in South Florida, but his uncle, Booker Pickett Sr., played at Miami in the 90s. His cousin, Booker Pickett Jr., has just arrived and enrolled at Miami to play defensive end, and sounds like Booker Pickett Jr. is already doing pretty well and turning heads in the offseason workouts, which is great. So hopefully the family ties and the ties to the university can help sway DJ Pickett to Miami. Miami is competing for him with the likes of LSU, which is considered the co-favorite with Miami by most, Florida, Oregon, Georgia, among others. Now, the On3 prediction tracker, for what that's worth, considers LSU to be the slight trending leader for him, with Miami trending in second. I believe maybe Miami could be the team in the slight lead right now, but things are obviously fluid here since this is one of the top players in the country, okay? And, you know, we'll talk about this throughout the show. What Miami does on the field this fall is always going to be a factor for top players like this. And it doesn't matter when they verbally commit, right? Whether players verbally commit in July or they wait until signing day in December, or if they want to do an October type commit like some players do, the results and the performances that Miami puts on the field this year are going to be decisive one way or the other with a lot of the top players that they're after. Because there are players out there that would really like to be in Miami, but they want to make sure that the program is trending to the heights we think that they're trending to with all the talent that they have acquired. So DJ Pickett visiting is gigantic. And you know this is going to be a story we're going to be monitoring throughout the weekend. And hopefully we get some good feedback from DJ after the weekend is over. Miami has 4-star wide receiver Dallas Wilson on campus this weekend. He's an Oregon verbal commit out of Tampa. This is one Miami has seemingly been relentless on, trying to flip him from that Oregon commitment. And, you know, you're probably, of course, Kevin Beard is one of the top recruiters in the country. He was just recognized as such by 24/7 Sports, talking about the Miami Hurricanes wide receivers coach. Miami is really, really serious about, you know, trying to flip Wilson from this Oregon commitment. My understanding is that Wilson actually grew up an Oregon fan, which obviously could play into the Ducks' favor. But then when you talk about Florida kids, this is another Tampa kid. When you talk about Florida kids, the idea of going cross country can always be a difficult one when it actually comes time to put pen to paper. So we'll see if Miami can make more progress with Dallas Wilson. This is a big official visit. He was supposed to visit this past weekend, but he was involved in the OT7 7-on-7 event, so he rescheduled for the following week. It's great to get him on campus this week. 4-star cornerback Chris Ewald out of Chaminade, one of the most important players on Miami's board, and 4-star safety Amari Wallace from Miami Central will both be visiting this weekend. We haven't talked about Wallace a lot lately, but going back to March, he has multiple crystal balls that predicted him to be a Hurricane. We'll see if Miami can continue that trend. And, you know, with Ewald, we've talked about him so much. You know, I don't need to reiterate that, of course, number one, Miami really needs to solidify their defensive backfield for the future. You want to keep recruiting top defensive backs. This guy absolutely fits the bill. He's from an important local area high school that needs to be a pipeline for Miami moving forward. Of course, you just landed Zaquan Patterson and JoJo Trader from that high school in this past cycle. So Chris Ewald, one of the most important recruits on Miami's board. And as Brian Smith told us on Monday's episode, it seems to be Miami versus Georgia for Ewald. Smith noted Ewald doesn't really like to travel, so that could play in Miami's favor. So we'll see if Miami can take a firm lead coming out of that visit this weekend. You've got interior offensive lineman Isaac Sowles Jr. visiting. This is someone who could be, you know, he could play guard or center. So we're always looking, who's going to be the center of the future? Could it be Sowles? Could it be someone like S.J. Alofai-Tuli, who's visiting later this month, who's very high on Miami's board? But Sowles is definitely a candidate there. He's actually been crystal balled to NC State earlier this month. So we'll see if Miami can change that narrative. 6'4", 300-pound defensive lineman Myron Charles is visiting. Florida State considered the strong trending favorite for him. You got Interior offensive lineman Max Buchanan visiting. He's a 4-star. Doesn't seem to be a strong trending leader for him, with FSU, Miami, UCF, and Clemson considered to be the top 4 according to On3. And yes, as we will reiterate throughout the program, obviously Miami needs to set the tone with these OVs. If you want to get another potentially top 10 class over the finish line, you've got to win this coming season. Now, the most accurate prediction magazine for the past 29 years, the most accurate of those publications, has predicted Miami to get it done in a lot of ways on the field this year. I want to talk about what's in the Phil Steele preview, which is just dropped. Phil Steele seems bullish on Miami. We will explain why when we come back. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And if you're a small business owner, you're only getting started with LinkedIn Jobs, because when you're hiring, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much for making this Tuesday episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Now, folks, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Guys, it's always one of the highlights of my summer is when we start getting the preview magazines. Athlon and Lindy's have already come out for this year, and the digital version, which comes out a few days before the printed version, the digital version of Phil Steele's 2024 college football preview has dropped. Now, Steele's magazine, pound for pound, has been the most accurate over the past 29 years. And I was surprised to see this, pleasantly surprised. But then anytime I get pleasantly surprised about preseason hype, I always get nervous, right? But Phil actually has the Miami Hurricanes ranked number 10 in his preseason top 40. Not only is Miami ranked top 10, which I guess in Phil Steele's mind means Miami is going to make it to the college football playoff this year, but he also has Miami actually ranked higher than Clemson and Florida State, etc., inside the ACC. So, and by the way, his top 10, this is where he expects teams to finish at the end of the season, his preseason top 40. And, you know, he's got Miami at number 10. This is where he expects them to finish the year. Miami has not finished a season inside the top 10 since 2003. So if Steele's prediction comes true, this would be Miami's best season in over 20 years. So he has Miami at number 10 behind, in order, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Utah, and Michigan. And at number 10, he's got Miami right in front of Iowa, Clemson, Florida State, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma State. Here's what Steele said about Miami, why he's so bullish. Quote, Mario Cristobal hit the portal hard and brought in quarterback Cam Ward, running back Damian Martinez, and a plethora of others to go along with a team that already had talent. Cristobal won a pair of Pac-12 titles in his 4 years with Oregon and built that team into a powerhouse. Miami has my number 7 offensive line and number 12 defensive line, and only has the number 43 schedule and has 0 road trips versus top 20 teams. Now, I think something that Steele points out that makes a lot of sense that not a lot of people talk about is how important strength of schedule is, because listen, when you evaluate teams around the country, you look at a team like Florida, for example, and of course, Miami has that head-to-head with Florida to start the year. Hurricanes are favorites to win that game. I hope it plays out that way. But like, a team like Florida could be just pound for pound better, let's say, than a team like NC State this year. But NC State would probably finish ranked ahead of Florida because they've got, a much more favorable schedule. Florida has the hardest schedule in the entire country. Okay. So strength of schedule is important. Now, trying to predict strength of schedule preseason doesn't always work out because you don't necessarily know how good all these teams are going to be. There are surprise teams every single season. I get it. But what Steele points out makes a lot of sense because Miami this year, they avoid two of the best teams in the conference. They don't play, and unless, of course, they face one of these teams in the conference championship game. But in the regular season, you don't have Clemson or NC State on the schedule this year, which are expected to be two of the better teams in the conference. Obviously you play Florida State, but you play them at home, which theoretically is better than playing them on the road. He mentions number 43 strength of schedule. That's a factor in his rankings, of course. So I think that's something interesting that Steele points out that not a whole lot of people do. Now, the bridge that Miami has to gap this year is, we commonly say this, and I have conversations about this all the time with Kenton Gibbs, my Locked On ACC co-host. I believe Miami's team is more talented heading into this year than they've been in a really long time. So it's like they're way more talented than they were 2022, 2023, 2021. At the same time, the 2022 team should have been better than 5-7, right? The 2023 team should have been better than 7-6. So if you look at the talent on this team and say, hey, they have the talent to maybe be a 10 or 11 win team, and they've got a favorable schedule this year, Miami still has to show you that they can bridge that gap of playing up to the sum of their parts, if that makes any sense. So, we need to see that talent turn into wins. And a lot of that happens, of course, with coaching, right? You can't be failing to take any knees this year, obviously. But a big part of it, my friends, is depth. And I think Miami has more depth than they've had in a long time at most positions. There are a couple of exceptions there, which we will talk about, but more depth than they've had in a very long time. And these players, because every time I talk to players, and I love the quote that we got from true freshman linebacker Bobby Pruitt at the end of last week, they understand that they need to be a player-led team. And I don't mean that to diminish the role of coaching. Obviously, coaching is very, very important when it comes to accumulating talent, preparation for game day. But when it actually comes to the leadership, most of that leadership needs to come within the locker room. That's the way it was when Miami was winning championships in the 80s, 90s, 2001. Those were player-led teams. Like the coaches weren't there to babysit, right? The players needed to handle a lot of that stuff internally. Miami understands that they need to do that. So Steele has Miami at number 10 in his top 40. And, you mentioned there in that summary, I mentioned there that, he's got Miami with the 7th rated offensive line and the 12th rated defensive line in the country. Here are the other unit rankings that he had for Miami as far as top 15 goes. Now, the defensive backfield, not surprisingly, was outside of the top 15. That's an area where Miami's got to prove it on the field with some youth, some unproven players. That's a challenge for Miami this year in the defensive backfield because on paper, there's not a lot of experience there outside of Mish Powell and Daryl Porter Jr. He rated Miami's linebacker room. I think they could end up maybe being even higher than this as the 15th rated in the country at linebacker. Kiko is one of the very best. I think Wesley Basaint's going to have a huge year. I think Jalen Alderman was a massive, massive addition, and I'm very high on Popo Aguirre. So I think Miami might even be able to outperform that ranking at 15th at linebacker. At wide receiver, he's got Miami rated 11th in the country, top in the ACC, by the way. At running back, he's got Miami rated 7th in the country, and obviously, I agree that they should be ranked high at running back, but how high that they are ranked, I think is going to depend a lot on how healthy and when Mark Fletcher is fully healthy. because once he and Martinez are both there cracking skulls in the same games, it's going to be huge for the Hurricanes. Now, Martinez should be one of the best in the ACC, if not one of the best in the country. And you've got other good talent there, guys who can change the pace like Chris Johnson, AJ Allen, Jordan Lyle, who's turning heads already since he just got on campus a few weeks ago. But to me, like how far Miami's running back group goes is going to depend a lot on how quickly Mark Fletcher is healthy. And hopefully that's game one. Because if you can have Martinez and Fletcher both fully healthy against Florida, game one, what a luxury that would be. At quarterback, Steele has Miami ranked 10th in the country, right? We'll take that with Cam Ward. And he mentioned he actually would have rated Ward higher than number 10 if not for the 46 fumbles in 4 years. We know that's something that Ward has to clean up on. That was talked about a lot during spring football. Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator, thinks he has an idea of how he can help Ward clean that up. And I think Ward, that's something that he works on tirelessly. And, having better offensive line play than he's had, the last couple of years at Washington State, I think is something that could automatically help the fumbles as well. And lastly, on the Phil Steele preview, he's got Miami leading the ACC with 7 first-team All-ACC selections. He's got quarterback Cam Ward, first-teamer, running back Damian Martinez, wide receiver Xavier Restrepo, defensive tackle Simeon Barrow, defensive end Ruben Bain, linebacker Kiko Maui Noah, and kicker Andy Borregales. Hashtag kickers are players too. We don't forget about Andy. Automatic Andy. It's a great guy to have. You're down 2 points, game on the line. This is someone you need. So, folks, another important factor in Miami's success this coming season, it's going to depend on the versatility and the creativity. We'll talk about the most versatile players on the team when we come back. We're not done yet. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. The money keeps rolling in thanks to these Florida Panthers money lines. The Cats are up 2-0 in their Stanley Cup Final Series, and we are loving every second of it. 2 wins away, my friends. And if you've been playing along and betting along on FanDuel, we've all been having a good time together. And summertime, it also means baseball, and it means the NBA Finals, and you can bet on all of it at FanDuel right now. New customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Shout out to the everydayers. And if you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, sign up and become a Locked On Canes insider. I include the link in the show description below. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours with show updates and previews, breaking news, recruiting scoops, all of it right there. Try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value there on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. All right, so we got, by the way, questions I want to answer here from the Locked On Canes Insiders. A couple of these that came in late last week that I'm finally getting to these, but they're fantastic questions. Which players, both on offense and defense, will play the most versatile roles as lining up at positions to confuse the other side so that they don't know where the attack is coming from? He says, think like Will Anderson from Alabama or Taysom Hill, who's with the Saints and used to be, of course, with TCU. The guys who are going to be like the Swiss Army knives on either side of the football. The obvious one to start with, folks, we saw it during spring football, Elijah Lofton. And I know you may be thinking, well, he's a true freshman. How much is he really going to play? That dude, I think, is going to play a lot this year. He has the comfort of someone who's been in the program for a full season, which is a testament to his work ethic, his physical and mental maturity. I think Elijah Lofton, who, comes in as a true freshman tight end, but we saw him line up a lot in practice at running back, saw him line up wide. We spoke to his roommate, Bobby Pruitt, who said if he needed to go out there on defense and crack somebody, he could do that as well. Elijah Lofton, he is the embodiment of a Swiss Army knife. So I think that's someone. And, our boy Larry Bluestein, has said it a couple times on this show. He thinks even the opening game against Florida he thinks Elijah Lofton is going to play a role and be an important part of potentially a Miami victory in that game. Chris Johnson is another one. And again, he may not be as high on the running back depth chart as Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher, but Johnson, with his element of blazing speed, you've got to get him on the field. You've got to use him in creative ways. He played a lot of receiver in high school, so you can line him up in the slot, line him up wide. I think Johnson, to me, is another one. Ray Joseph has a lot of versatility. You can use him in some gadget plays. Just get him in space with his quickness. On defense, a couple of guys who can line up in multiple different ways on the defensive line. And we're going to see it this year. Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor. And I'm especially excited about the possibilities of a NASCAR package, a speed package on 3rd and long, where you can have Bain and Mesidor lined up inside, and let's say Lofton and Tyler Barron lined up on the edges, and quarterbacks are going to be, they're not going to be throwing Hail Marys. They're going to be saying Hail Marys before they drop back. Otherwise, you're going to get crushed by one of those guys. Mish Powell is another one because, again, I think he's going to start. I just don't know if he's going to start at nickel or safety because he can do either or both at a very high level. I'm also going to say Robbie Washington. Is Robbie Washington another one, a quick receiver you got to get the football to in space, and he can even play defensive back if needed. We saw him do some of that in spring football. He got some work in as a defensive back. I also want to say definitely JoJo Trader is someone who could be really noted and used for his versatility. I'll throw a shout out again. I enjoyed so much talking with Cameron Bobby Pruitt last week, and his background is safety. He's moved to linebacker because of how much bigger he's gotten and how hard he hits. But that's another one. You can line up Bobby Pruitt in a number of different ways. So if I left anybody out, you let me know. The guys who you think are going to be the most versatile players this year, the Swiss Army knives on either side of the football, drop us a comment or leave us an X post at Locked On Canes on X is where you can follow us. And if you follow us at Locked On Canes, we will follow you back. All right, we get a recruiting message from one of our insiders who says, hey, looking at the target board, the recruiting target board, it looks like we're a long shot to land many of our top prospects. Last year, with all the defensive linemen and wide receivers, we felt very confident we would land most of the guys we wanted. This year, it seems different, he says. It seems as if we're on the outside looking in for many of our guys. For example, we really need to land guys such as DJ Pickett, Jose Epinesa, who's visiting, I think he's visiting the last weekend of the month on Epinesa, and we need to flip Solomon Thomas in order to most likely finish in the top 5, if not the top 10. What's your take on this? And are you worried that we're on the outside looking in? And he put like 6 question marks after that question. I don't get worried in early June. It's official. We're not half done with the summer official visits, not to mention fall official visits that are coming up. And although I think there's a little revisionist history in there, because you make it sound like last June we were just kicking our feet up. It's like Miami's landing everybody. Was not like that. In fact, even coming out of July, after Miami had missed out on defensive linemen like Justin Scott before knowing he would end up flipping here, and when we thought we were getting Armando Blunt and he flipped to Florida State before flipping back here in December, and you missed out on Kamari and Franklin, some other defensive linemen, revisionist history, because I remember a lot of Miami fans panicking last year and even later than June, like we're talking July, August, Miami fans panicking like, oh, you guys were promising this amazing defensive line class, but nobody wants to come here. Nobody wants to come here. And then, Miami ends up flipping Justin Scott. They end up landing Artavius Jones and Marquise Lightfoot, and they flip Armando Blunt back from Florida State. And, Miami ended up with the top defensive line class in the country, and obviously ended up with one of the best wide receiver classes in the country. But let's not all pretend that last June it was like everything's going great. There was some panic there. So I'm going to have a better idea of how we should all feel about this once early July rolls in, because, a lot of the players that are doing official visits in June will be deciding, not all of them, some of them will wait, but many players will start verbally committing to Miami or other various spots, late June, early into July. So Usually July 4th weekend is kind of a good barometer of where you stand. And then the other thing is, let's not pretend that it ends in the summer, because again, heading into the third year of Mario Cristobal, heading into a season where Miami does have lofty expectations. We just talked about what Phil Steele wrote in his college football preview magazine. Actually winning and backing it up on the field this year is going to be so important, because if Miami wins, some of these players that, you may not think are very interested in Miami at this point, some of these players will come around. If you think, oh, Miami's in third place or fourth place for this 5-star player, a lot of that can turn around depending on how the season goes. Folks, I think we're going to have another episode later today talking some recruiting with Brad Tejeda from CanesInsight.com. So join us later on today, my friends. In the meantime, smash that like button. If you're watching us on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to Locked On Canes, subscribe on all your favorite audio platforms, and we'll talk to you again on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.